Welcome back to the Mr. and Mrs. Mr. podcast show, where this is part 2 of the race talk in white and black families.
Have different experiences than we do, have really helped us develop ourselves first, so that we can then develop our kids. Because like you guys had said, the work truly begins in our minds, our hearts, and in our homes. And then as we do that work, then it continues to be able to move out. So hopefully, like we said, my kids don't have to have conversations with their kids about police officers killing Black people.
Yes.
So that's really my kind of my journey.
Love that, right? Because that kind of leads me to the next portion of what I want to find out, right? Because like a lot of people will probably, be watching this. There's like a cops cam. I love it. That's actually a perfect time. We didn't plan this at all. That's actually a perfect time. And so, but it brings me up to the question, right? Because a lot of white people will be watching this, right? And they're saying, hey, like I didn't come up, like now I'm starting to read like your sister did or something like that. Or just like you guys were saying, like, hey, I'm starting to learn, like, hey, what I learned was fair. The same thing, kind of like what like Drew Brees said, like, this is just what I know, right? This is what I know in a sense. And so coming up, like that awakening has to happen in the heart, in the head, in the home, and then it goes out. And some people now are grown or fully grown in a sense, and so they've had many years to develop a C drive that is like, this is just the norm. This is just who I am. What would you recommend to, I guess, white people who saw the George Floyd video, who may have seen something now, is like, you know what? Wow, like I didn't really get this before. What work would you give them to say, hey, this is how you not just be like, well, I'm not oppressing anybody, but I'm a part of a system there. So what are some things that you would give them? I don't kind of put you on the spot here, but like, what are some things that you would tell them if they came like, hey, I don't want to be this way. What do I need to do? Like, what are some steps? If you could just kind of name some.
So I have like a real close-knit group of girlfriends from college.
Mm-hmm.
We're all white women.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had asked them the question of like, what are they doing? And they all kind of said, I don't know. Like, I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And like Luke said, I said, it probably sounds silly, but proximity is important. And maybe in your teeny tiny Texas town, there are 0 Black people.
Yep.
But I know you get on Facebook. I know you get on Instagram. I know that you can follow bloggers who are Black voices. You can shop at Black stores. You can look at Black artists' work and listen to music that is diverse. And just said, like, surround yourself intentionally with other voices that are not like ours, because so often
Same, yeah.
we're the loudest voice, I feel like, or we're the comfortable voice.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, read some hard stuff and be quiet.
Shut up.
Don't argue with anybody about what they're saying. Like when we got married, our biggest argument was like, my feelings are my feelings and I'm allowed to feel however I want. And I need you to just hear me in them, right? And I'm not even the feeler, and that still was our like conversation.
You're talking to somebody here in this house.
Yeah. You can't tell me how to feel.
No, you know how to feel. No.
I think that here's the note of what we're talking about now. Like, because many people will come and say the same thing about this exact topic, right? My truth is my truth, and you're coming there. And I think this is the saying, like, perception is reality for you, but I think there's also understanding that other perceptions also make other realities. And so it's like, it's not thinking, like, it would be selfish for me to say Jeffrey's reality is the only reality that matters. The way my parents taught me and the way I came up, everybody else needs to adjust to me to get to that point. Like, I need to see how they came up, and having those, it only comes from things like this, of having a conversation of like, oh, I never knew like that came out. My perception was just racists were born and they came out and they had like they had a Nazi swat, you know what I'm saying, something, and they were like, be racist, be racist. There are steps to like baking a cake, right? Like you baking a racist through like, oh, have a racist grandmother or something. You know what I'm saying? Like there are ingredients to racism that I don't know if anybody really puts into play of doing it. You can say.
And I think it goes back to the empathy. For me, for example, like growing up, I grew up in a single parents household for like 12 years or whatnot. And so I don't have to empathize with somebody who don't have a father. I know how that feels, right? My mom, though, she was not abused, right? She wasn't abused, but I empathize with women who have been, Jeff don't beat me, but I empathize with women who are, who are beaten, right? I never was a victim of child abuse, right? But when I hear about stories with children of child abuse, I empathize with that. My heart goes out to them, right? Because number one, I have 2 children, right? And I believe that's what I'm asking, for people, that are white, our allies, is like, you may not understand how it feels to be Black or how to be, asked when you go into a store, just certain questions about being in the store, or even when we travel, because we travel a lot with our kids, and people always say, oh, your kids are so well behaved. Like, what does that supposed to mean? Like, do they supposed to be running, and I know they don't mean any harm, but it's just like, what else do they supposed to be doing? Or when people, or the lady in Texas Roadhouse who told me, you need to get that child under control, and Texas Roadhouse, for those who have been there, is very loud, right? So, so my thing is, I just want the empathy. That's the thing. It's just like, and the voice, because, I can't go and speak to your white friends, right? You guys have a relationship. So that's what I'm saying, is having allies on the side of us who will be able to, like, to hear that story about the change. Like, that's amazing, because that's where it starts. Like, having those type of stories, just having allies on the side of us, like, hey, like, because you guys have a voice just as much as we have a voice. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that's just what's so important. So I appreciate you guys really, like, awakening your communities and your networks, because that's where change again comes about, and again, it's having that empathy, like, and for me, it was like to hear it, nothing else resonated, to hear George Floyd call out to his mom. Like, wow, that should resonate with anybody who's ever had a mother, right? Like, or have a child. Like, that should resonate. Like,
I had a mother as well.
Yeah.
But no.
Yeah.
But no, point. And so, like you said, right, dealing with the empathy, also too, like you guys kind of implicit bias, right? So it's like getting and thinking the way that I think, like, how do I think, and what makes me think the way I think. So yeah, like dig into that. And that's a tough process, right? So like when I say peanut butter, most people say
jelly.
Yes, I thought you were gonna say pickles, but yeah, see jelly is tied too. We all have that implicit bias of like, I don't know what grade level, it's like peanut butter and jelly go together, right? Something we're taught, and it's just a part of what it is. And so I realized from like listening and like talking to my white friends of like, they equated like, oh, Black people with their living in poor housing, they are on welfare type things and whatnot. It's like, well, what makes you think that? And so then they start thinking like, oh, we watch the news. I heard from, my church member who'd always have an experience like that. And so that becomes their reality. So like to break that implicit bias is really digging into, like you mentioned like that, like you're gonna be like, oh my goodness, like, I don't know what I don't know, but it's like, how do we set different places to do that? Like you said, because most of our friends are Black, and probably most of your friends are white too, but you guys, both of us have, things that we branched outside of our thing. I came up in an all Black neighborhood coming up, but we
went to school with diverse group of people.
Yes, that gave me perspective. Like, oh, these guys are just like us. Like they like girls, like the same. And so it's the same thing. So I didn't have that image of that in my folks. Thank God, like they didn't like paint something negative that's the first thing I saw. But I know a lot of people that didn't have that. And so the next part of this is like for couples who may be watching this, right? So like married couples or folks in relationships who are like, wow, I'm getting this. This is good stuff. This is what I want to do. Like, do they just, and like you said before, how do they set up things like this to where like, hey, guys, they just go into the like, hey, here's a black family. Like, can we talk? I know it can be awkward, I guess, for some people. Like, hey, I don't have anybody I can talk to that's black like that. Like, could you, like, how would you put yourselves in a situation? I know you're not. I don't know if you could think that way if you're not, but
Yeah.
How would you go about like fostering relationships with somebody like a black couple to gain that insight to help with that implicit bias?
I would encourage any white couple who only interacts with either white folks or supports white businesses that they need to diversify a little bit. I think that's not only good for who we are and the people that we're around, but also I think that's pretty biblical to be able to say that the kingdom of God, and once we get to heaven, is going to be a very diverse group of people. And so I would say thinking about the businesses that you support, the church that you go to, and the leadership and what they value. We're really grateful to be at a church in Memphis that is, I would say, multicultural. I mean, like age, socioeconomic, like it's very diverse in all aspects of the word. And I think that has been really good for us. And so I think, over the last 2 weeks, I've had friends from, I grew up in Arizona, and friends who have reached out that have said, like, listen, I've seen something change in you through social media, but I want to be able to have conversations about that. And I've kind of been able to point them in the right direction to be able to say, like, listen, I and Kimber, like, we are far from having this figured out, but here are some resources that I've used that have pushed us in the right direction to be able to develop empathy for other people's stories, but also, to help us think about intentionally about the choices we're making, in everyday life. And so, it's like I would begin by encouraging people to diversify their thought.
Diversify that life portfolio.
Because I think something that you talked about that we've had conversations in the last couple of days is like, you grow up with a specific worldview and belief set that you typically are given from your parents, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then what happens in this information overload world is sources we take in, which continually confirm our own biases, right? And what we need to do, especially me, I should say us as a couple, the work that we have to continually do is, one, question the beliefs that we had growing up.
Come
Two,
on.
Continue to read and consume information through the perspective of someone else. And then this is where we're at this week with our kids, is like, it's not enough just to learn. It's not enough just to pray. Like, we now need to move into this place where we're going to do some sort of action.
Come on, Luke.
And so, I think for me, the beautiful thing this week is like, I don't know what night it was today. With COVID, you never know what day it is. Today's Sunday. Maybe this was Wednesday, but we had, had conversations with the kids, and my 6-year-old was like, I want to go to the protest. I want to go use my voice. And so I took the girls 2 nights ago, or on Wednesday, and we walked and we had conversations, and Kimber talked to them the next day. And then she took the kids last night to the protest downtown. And so I think, like,
I was down there too. I was down there. Yes. Awesome. Yes. We got a chance to walk.
I think trying to get to a place where we're continually learning, but also showing our kids that, like, part of the work that we have to do is doing the work. So, yeah.
And I would also say, like, I was trying to think through, like, the biases in my head that might say this, and it may be like, oh, that's not true. But it's like, we live in the South. It's friendly.
Yep.
I can't tell you how many people I've met in the park at the playground with my kids who then we've become friends because we see each other at the zoo and the park and we've had conversations and then our kids become close. So then we end up spending time. And it's like, if we as parents are intentional about the parents that we're talking to and spending time with, it also like helps us diversify who we're spending time with, just simply by paying attention. And I think growing up, there was a lot of that, I don't see race. And I think sometimes we just have to be really intentional at stepping out of what's normal into something that feels a little bit different.
Love that. Yes, love that, Kimber. Yes, and that push, and you wouldn't even know. Like maybe like, oh, I do go to playgrounds with different people. I don't know. I just haven't seen it. Like grocery store, at church, or at work, or just around different things, or at the rally situation you go to. And so, like my people that you just like, oh wow. And so, I got a message from like when we were on a cruise. I never told you about this, but like when we were on a cruise when we first got married. And so there was a couple that we met because they make you like seat with like
year 3. I remember we went, was in 2009. It was our first cruise.
She was. And so she reached out to me, and so Jess from Comes Like This, she was like, hey,
Jennifer.
Jennifer. So shout out to Jennifer, she's watching this right now. And so good couple. And so she reached out to me and I was like, hey, it's Jennifer from the cruise. I was like,
that was
10 years ago. It was like 10 years ago. She was like, hey, I wanted to see like what could I do, like to speak, because she's a hairdresser. She's like, I have people's attention for 2 hours regardless. And so I was like, that's where you could really make change. You could really push into really making change and really pushing into those.
So, and I would say for people who really want to know how can that, action, right? Action, because, like I love what you said, first you guys were discussing and all that stuff, and now you're looking for action. Well, first thing is really, like you said, having those conversations among your networks, hey, we're allies with you. This is where, because one thing I tell people all the time, Dr. Martin Luther King not only had African Americans walking with him, but he had people from all denominations walking with him, all races. Because that's what change really persists, right? So it takes all of us because, we're one voice, especially when we're the ones that's being oppressed. They won't listen to us. Some people may not, but they will listen to somebody that may look like them. It's kind of like, you listen to people who look like you, right? But another thing too, is like pushing for policy changes and also, vote. Like, it's more important, like, because the people who are making the laws are the ones who's making the decisions for our behalf. And I don't say this because I can say this because I am a citizen of South Haven. But one of the things I told Jeff, I was like, even for our board, it does not look like us. South Haven has become so diverse now. But everybody that's on there don't represent, what I'm saying? They don't look like us. So our city boards and our board of aldermen and our city councils should look like a representation of your population. So pushing for that. Also sensitivity training for our police officers. It should be because again, like you stated, like some things we grew up on, and I get that. We can't change, we grew up on that, but it's about learning and being educated on. And so you have to have sensitivity training. Also body cameras for everybody. I mean, so the list could go on and on. Also, economic disparities. So like, why do we have in the Delta? I grew up in the Delta where it's still like black school, white school, like, and it's economic and social disparity. So how can we address those issues? So again, having these type of conversations to say, hey, enough is enough. We're standing up. We cannot take this any longer. So that's how we create change. And so I'm grateful we had this conversation with you guys today because I really feel like you guys are in the right direction, and like having those conversations is so important because again, it doesn't just take Jeff and I, it takes all of us. It doesn't take just Black people. It's going to take every single race. I mean, to see China of all places marching.
I saw Paris holding the fist up. I saw you. I see you, Paris.
Like China, London, Paris, Amsterdam, Australia. I mean, all these countries. Like, and even like Mississippi, like you hear so many things, but I love my state. I was born here, and it's not a perfect state, but to see even people of Petal, Mississippi. I'm not for sure if you guys heard about the mayor in Petal who basically made the
I'll
comment.
say this.
Yeah, go ahead.
He said that if you can say you can't breathe, then you can breathe. That was his official comment to insert like no empathy, insert the opposite of everything you guys just named, what that looks like. And if I always put people to say, if it was somebody of your family or somebody, your mother or something like that, what would you want other people to say or anything? So that's
so basically the people, black, white, was like, we want you to resign. You got to leave here. You cannot, this is not what we stand for any longer. And so again, like, you know, it takes all of us. So yeah.
So yes, okay. So we can. I know this is. We could go on. Yes. I want to thank you guys.
Yes,
first
thank
of all,
you. Yes.
Thank you.
Round of applause. Yeah, because I was talking to Luke about this. Like, this would be a great idea to do it. He was like, "Say less. Let's go ahead and get it done." So he was like, "Let me talk to the boss first and see what time." And so I was like, "Good." So I give him credit for that. I was like, "Good idea. Good idea." I want to make sure that. Thank you guys for being open and honest. A lot of times people are afraid of saying the wrong things. Like they don't want to come off in the wrong place. And so in conversation, I want to say the black, white, whoever, right? In terms of like having the grace to say, hey, having conversations, everything won't go smoothly because other people will leave from this thing. You know what? Let me do a conversation like this before. Somebody at the park or something like that. And it may be something that's offensive to you, but at least they're having the conversation. You're sitting down and being able to listen with empathy on both sides, saying, hey, we're here. It may not be, they may not like put up a fist or may go to the protest or whatever like that, but like having a conversation is a starting place that we have to get to instead of just yelling at each other. And I think many times, that's the conversation. You do this, no, you do this, and nothing ever changes.
It takes all of us.
Yep, nothing ever changes. So I think there, and so the last portion of this, we do something called Laugh, Learn, Love. This last portion, which is gonna be fun, up here is we just kind of give tips. I think you guys kind of hit on everything to do right now. So if you're listening, your homework is go and find a couple or a person that's outside of your core of who you are and just engage in a conversation. If you're, like you said, if you're white, listening to what their situation is. And so if you're black, if they don't get it right in the first time, having the grace to say, hey, let's come back and continue to have this conversation on both sides. But love that. And so any takeaways that you guys want to leave with somebody who may be listening? It's like, you know what? Ouch. They hit some things that are just who I am. What are some things or final thoughts you want to leave with like somebody listening?
You go ahead.
I gotta think for a second.
I would say to anyone who is any white folks out there that happen to be watching this, I guess my first piece of advice would just be to shut up and listen for a while.
Humility.
Have some humility and be willing to be able to listen. It's like what people who love Jesus really want is reconciliation, but we can't have any sort of reconciliation without listening and forgiveness. And thank you and repentance. And so I guess my one piece of advice is just be quiet and to listen to the stories and the experiences of Black folks that are around you in order to be able to learn and grow and develop and figure out what you can do as an ally.
Love it.
I think we're going to get it wrong a lot.
Yeah.
I'm going to get it wrong. And it's okay to admit that you were wrong and say like, man, I thought this was appropriate. And as I'm learning, wow, was I wrong? And like really repenting to people who you know that you've hurt or relationships you know you've harmed over the years. And maybe you can't always do that, but I think that that's really important and valuable. And I can't remember whether it was Mr. or Mrs. Mr. But one of you said like, shoot, no, I can't even remember. I know.
It's not
Seriously. Dang it.
I know. It's so profound too. I know it's there.
I lost it for a minute.
Maybe it'll come back.
Yeah, keep digging there. So, yes, there we go.
The more you know you don't know. It's like God. The bigger, like, the more you learn, the more I learn, the more I realize I am just starting to scratch the surface.
Yeah.
And so this is not a just right now. This is not a one conversation. This is a lifetime of learning and growing.
Love it. Love it. Yes. So that's the homework, guys. That is the homework. That is, you guys said it. See, I knew it would come back. We had to. The spirit fingers there got it. The spirit fingers got it right there. So thank you guys for watching. If you could give your names, and if you wanted to give any social media, like if anybody wanted to follow you or something like that, like I don't know if you don't have to. You can be like, just say your name if you don't want to.
Yeah, Luke Savidge on Instagram. It's luke.savage. And Savage is spelled weird. It's not S-A-V-A-G-E. I'm gonna break it down. S-A-V-I-D-G-E. So.
Savage.
Wow,
Yes.
that's
Savage.
different.
Yes. I misspelled the first time. He was like, no, it's Savage. So yeah, I haven't misspelled it against you.
And I'm Kimber Savidge. I don't know what my thing is on Instagram anymore.
It's
is
Kimber
it still,
Savidge.
I was like, I think the direction it is.
So yes, thank you guys. We are at Mr. Mrs. Mr. So mr.mrs.mister. I'm Jeffrey Mister at Mr. Jeffrey Mr. MrJeffrey and Mrs. Mister. I'll go ahead and drop this in the thing too.
Yeah,
So
and, I'm Mrs. Mister.
MRS.
It's Mrs. Dana
Yeah.
Mister. See, I don't know why we don't know
The
that.
handle. You gotta get your handle right. The elevator with like Obama.
Yes.
President Obama's like, hey, can I follow you? Like, oh my goodness, what is my
So, but also talk about change for those who are watching online. Again, thank you listening. This will drop on Wednesday, so it's a great opportunity at 6 p.m. Wednesday night at Brown Baptist Church on 980 State Line Road East. We're doing a rally for peace and a rally for justice and peace. So again, for those who listen, Wednesday, June 10th, 6 p.m. It's a great opportunity for this. We're gonna have water. We're gonna have voters registration drive. We're gonna have masks. So we're still gonna be practicing social distancing. You can stay in your car if you want to.
Corona's over now.
Or if you want to just, we just want to provide an opportunity for our voices to be heard. Again, we are inviting all city leaders to come out as well. So again, we just want change. It's like we could continue to have these protests and all of this, but it's time for change. And so again, Wednesday, June 10th, 6 p.m., Brown Baptist Church, 980 State Line Road East.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. So we like to end with this. So whether you argue through this episode, whether you sit out to a whole bunch of episodes, we call it the Mr. Mantra. And it goes this way. You look at your spouse if you have one, or you look at yourself. If you try to dig yourself, you say these three things. You say, I like you, I love you, and I want you. So you think about any argument you've had, one or more of those things have been missing, right? So you rather, I don't like you right now, I don't love you right now, or I don't want you right now. Sometimes it's a combination of So what we're gonna do is you're actually gonna look at your spouse. You guys are gonna do this too. Look at them. You're gonna look at them. And so there we go. You're gonna look at them. We'll wait till it comes back to get this. This is the seal of a deal here. Like the song. And so yes. Here we go. That's what I'm talking about. Yes, and so you're going to end. So it's I like you.
I love you.
And I want you. But you have to say it together. You're going to look at each other. You're going to say, I like you. I love you. And I want you.
And then kiss each other.
You're going to get a kiss at the end. I told you, surprise. Go in for it here. This is what you're going for.
Okay.
So you ready? Let's count down for 3. 1, 2, 3.
I like you. I like you. I love you. I want you.
Whoa! That's my favorite part of the show. This is the real reason why I came up with this podcast.
That's why you did it. I love it.
That's the point of doing it. So thank you guys. If you watch it, share it with somebody else, man, who could really dig this conversation. Everybody, even no matter what your race is, you can dig into this conversation with that too. So come back to us, follow us. We're on YouTube too. We're on YouTube, the Mr. and Mrs. Mr. Podcast. If you want to see us, if you're listening, like, I wonder what they look like. Come on over and check it out and see. So we're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, all of our stuff. Yep. So thank you.
MPN as well.
Yes, MPN as well. Yes. Yeah. So we like God loves you. We love you. And ain't nothing you can do about it. So thank the Savage. Give the Savage a round of applause. That's what
Thank
you
you
do.
guys.
And they're not perfect. You don't have to be perfect. Just try. Just get in there and do it. Have those conversations. So what you got? We got to go out for like a real thing. I would love that. Love that to get some things. Kimber, so nice to meet you.
Yeah, that would be so fun.
Yeah, I'm with it. I'm with it. Luke and I set it up
It
here.
was so nice to meet both of you. Thank you so much for this.
No
This
problem.
is so great.
Thanks for being willing to do it. Most people are like, I don't want to be on Twitter. I don't want to be a meme of saying the wrong thing. So we had it with grace.
And it's the thing. It's like it's no judgment zone whatsoever. It's like because we understand we all have grown up the way we grown up and how you know. Because even for me, I want to correct some things on how I grew up, and the same for Joe. So you know, it's like one of the things that we, you know, it's all of us are learning and growing together, and that's how it's come about. So.
Yep. And so change. You see, my wife has this big. She probably has to go pee now. So.
I'm almost done. I'm already at 7 p.m.
She
So
got this thing.
Way job.
Just staying inside. You're doing a good job. She's doing a good job working out. So So all right, check out. We gotta bring you guys back on for like a future episode or something.
Yeah, let's do it.
Love that.
Talk about a lot of marriage stuff. So I think we can dig in some more stuff in there.
Yeah.
Luke is a character. I love this guy.
Yeah, I like it.
So I appreciate it. Thanks again.
Well, thank you, guys.